Hi and welcome. I'm Gina Tabrizi, licensed marriage and family therapist, and so excited to have you going on this journey with me. I'm going to be talking about all kinds of wellness, mental health issues, concerns for daily living, or things in your relationship. And this is just something that I do to be of service. I've been a therapist for wonderful 33 plus years now, and I've enjoyed it so much, and I've learned so much on this journey. I always say that my clients have been my best teachers. So sometimes it's a little bit intimidating to go into therapy. So by doing these talks with you, it's a way to kind of warm you up to the idea that getting help for yourself is no different than taking your car in for a tune-up or a checkup. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about you're not your history. So one of the things that therapists do that we often get accused of is blaming everything on your past, and especially blaming everything on your parents. I'm not going to say that we don't do that. It may appear to be that, but honestly, if you think about it, it makes sense. When you read a book from the beginning all the way through till its end, right? You don't start in the middle, and you certainly don't start at the end. So when you are starting to learn about a person's issues, about their concerns, about their maladaptive behavior, and maybe some disorders and disordered behavior, you need to start at the beginning. So the beginning of the book is really where you come from, where you were born, and who you were born to. See, we can't excuse the past. We can't say, well, I had a lousy past, I was abused as a child, I was beaten horrifically, I was ignored, I wasn't taken care of, my parents were alcoholic, but that has nothing to do with all the trouble and issues I'm having today. You really can't separate those two things. It's not about continuing to blame your family and your upbringing for the rest of your life. It's to recognize the patterns that you learned because you were in these maladaptive situations. So part of that is understanding, if I come from a home where my basic needs were not met, then there's certain things that I'm not going to learn to adapt in the world with other people and in relationships. One of the ways I like to describe having a history of trauma is to say that when your basic needs go unmet, you experience some kind of trauma. So trauma is often talked about as PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, which many people are familiar with, or you hear generally like combat vets that experience PTSD. But many people in their daily life that you know, your brother, your sister, your colleague, your boss, your friend, experience PTSD by growing up in a home where someone was extremely angry or violent, where there was drinking, where they had absent parents, where they were raised by one parent who wasn't available to them. There was a home where there was violence, maybe physical or sexual abuse, and sometimes spiritual abuse. So there's all kinds of ways where someone can experience in their history post-traumatic stress. Now, trauma, when I define it as not getting your basic needs met, then that could be not being regarded, not being held, not being given unconditional love, not being talked to like a person that's valued, not being listened to, not being understood. Now your emotional needs are things that can go unmet. And even though you're not in an abusive home and a home where trauma is very evident, you're still experiencing a form of trauma. It's an emotional trauma. So if you grow up feeling that you've never been heard, your opinion doesn't matter, people didn't value you, you were more seen than heard, or you were ignored, then you've integrated this into yourself as part of your self-esteem. So you think, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I don't deserve, nobody's ever going to care about me the way that I need or the way that I want to be cared for. So I want you to evaluate that within yourself. Are these things you've ever said to yourself and thought about yourself? Because if you have, go back and trace that pattern to your upbringing and look very deeply within yourself and decide, was there someone in my home that treated me in this way? Were there people in my home or in my life that treated me this way? Now, sometimes you can have a pristine upbringing and home and get all of those needs met, but then go out into the world as a young child and experience abuse in other places, like at school, like at your daycare, like at your grandma's house, like at wherever, at your church even, you know, and when you're being taken care of, going Bible study or whatever. Sometimes you'll find teachers or pastors or authority figures that are the ones that become more critical of you. Now, why am I so focused on this idea of you understanding basically there's ways that you're traumatized as a child? Well, because it starts a pattern in your life of behavior. You start to learn to adapt to the world based on these insecurities, based on these false ideas about yourself that you gained because of the trauma, and hopefully you can understand a little bit more clearly. If you're beaten all the time and someone tells you you're stupid, you grow up thinking you're stupid, even if you're the most intelligent person in the world. So your history informs a lot of how you grow up and how you develop. So you have to understand it, you have to uncover it so that you can grieve it, and then you can learn a new present. So how to be in the present without your history dictating to you who you are, how you're going to relate to other people. And all of us want to have a better present. All of us want to be healthy in the present, want to live our best lives, want to be well, want to be well adjusted, want to have good relationships. So this idea, maybe it's new to you, maybe you've heard of this, maybe you've already gone to some therapy or some support groups to explore this. It's important that you understand the value of starting to do a personal inventory around your history. So when you have these experiences and trauma and you've learned these negative beliefs about yourself, the one thing that you start to do is you start to, in your relationships, choose people that will repeat that pattern for you. You will start to choose people that treat you poorly or treat you critically, overbearing, controlling, dismissive, or diminish you in some way because you learned as a child that that was the way to be treated. It's not that you want to be treated poorly, you just find yourself repeating this pattern without even knowing. I know for me, in my first marriage, that's what I did. I repeated a pattern of hearing very negative things about myself or someone being angry at me or dismissing or ignoring me. First, I had interpreted that as a normal way of relating to another human being. So I want you to think about the ways that your family taught you to relate to the world and to other people. If you were taught to be seen and not heard, if you were taught that your opinion wasn't valued, if you were taught that if you had an emotion you would be shut down, yelled at, criticized, or hit, if you were completely just ignored and you were that latchkey kid that had to do everything for yourself, then you grew up too thinking nobody values me, I'm not important, nobody even notices I'm here. I remember a client of mine who I'll never forget who had moved here from another country, and when he got here his parents left him alone. For long periods of time, there was no one supervising him. He was in this home all by himself. And when he's like 10 or 11 years old, and they're waiting for aunts and uncles and other people that are going to come and take responsibility for him, but it takes at least a good year. So there's someone who periodically checks in on him, but he's basically left to his own vices. By this time, the kid's a teenager, he is so depressed and he's so introverted, he's turned into himself, and he feels so negatively about the world because he'd been in isolation for so long. Even though his basic needs were met, he had a roof over his head and there was food, shelter, water, periodically somebody would check on him, but there was nobody engaging with him in a daily life. So that may sound extreme or like an extreme pattern, but there's a lot of ways that as you were growing up, people didn't notice what you needed. People didn't ask you what you needed. People didn't attend to the things that you needed. Maybe they gave you the basic structure of what life or a home looked like, but they didn't meet those emotional needs, and that's where the damage happens. That's what we take into relationships moving forward. And the funny thing is that we have this inherent need to try to fix what was broken. And so we'll pick relationships that look exactly like our families of origin, and then we will set about thinking that we could fix it. Well, this time I'll have the mother that listens to me. So instead you choose the wife that doesn't listen, and you keep praying and hoping and begging and pleading to have that person listen to you. Or you choose the overbearing spouse, be that the wife or the husband, who is always on you about something, always criticizing you, always telling you that you're doing the wrong thing, always telling you that you don't measure up. So look at that right now. Take that inventory. Is that your spouse? Is that your boss? Is that your friend? Is it a brother or a sister who talks to you or treats you in that way? And stop for a moment and just hear that this isn't even about you. This is about the way that you learn to engage with people in your life. And if your primary caregivers taught you to be treated poorly, then you've accepted that as an adult it's okay to be treated poorly, even though it hurts you. Even though you feel depressed, even though you feel deprived, you find yourself repeating that pattern. So here's the work for you to do. You start by acknowledging and noticing the pattern and saying something in this relationship is not right. Like I said, it could be a friend, it could be family, it could be a lover, it could be your marriage, your spouse, whomever that significant other is for you. Start by noticing, wait a second, this doesn't feel right to me. It's upsetting to me. I feel sad. I feel deprived. I feel depleted. I feel like I'm not being considered. I feel like I'm not being respected. If you hit a point where you feel disrespect in a relationship, we are talking now about trauma and abuse. Because to be disrespected, whether that's by being ignored and never having your needs met, or someone's yelling at you, someone's calling you names. Name calling is a form of abuse. Definitely violence, being hit, of course, is an obvious form of abuse. But there's subtle ways. Controlling somebody and criticizing somebody all day long also feels like abuse. And over time, it starts to diminish you as a human being. It starts to tick away at your self-esteem and bring you down so that you start to feel so small. And when we allow ourselves to get to a place that we feel so very small in our esteem, in who we are, then depression can quickly and easily set in. And for some of you, it becomes despondent, where that means I don't want to be here anymore. You get into hopelessness, and it's very difficult to crawl out of that. And it's very difficult to fight for yourself in a relationship where you feel so sad, where you feel so depressed. So I need you to take an inventory of what your relationships are looking like. And like I said, this might speak to you as your partner, but it also might speak to you like, that's my boss. Like maybe I'm describing your boss. Maybe I'm describing your parent. Maybe I'm describing one of your children. So it could come from anywhere. This differential in our power. So sometimes it's your children who become the abusive one because you've been very submissive with them, and you're repeating that pattern because you were submissive as a child, because you had no choice. So then you do it with your children, and then your children think it's okay to dominate and overpower you. So wherever you find yourself in whatever relationship that is for you today, I want you to stop and say, this isn't okay. I know I'm experiencing right now the feeling that I'm having in this relationship is absolutely not okay, and I want to do something different. I want to learn and notice, where did I learn this pattern, and who is this person replicating for me? So if your father was the angry, loud one who was hurtful to you, or the one who was never available and always absent, or always critical of you, or just didn't seem to care, then if your spouse is treating you that way, then you're replicating the pattern that you had in relationship with your father. So they've now become your father. And if you had a very, very doting mother, but she was emotionally always wrecked, and always her emotions were bigger than your emotions, so you had to stuff your emotions, maybe that's one example of a mother that you had. And if your spouse is doing that now, well, guess what? Now you've replicated the pattern of your mother in relationship to your spouse. Your spouse is now your mom. And I always say to my clients, marry the best parts of your parents, not the worst. So as you're thinking about this now, and you're thinking about your partners, like I said, employee, boss, friend, lover, spouse, I want you to think about that. Did I marry the best parts, or did I marry the worst parts? Because in relationship with people, because of your past, because of not looking at it, because of not dealing with it, you just repeated a pattern that you did not mean to repeat. You did it on an unconscious level. And you can break that pattern. You can break that pattern first by acknowledging it and noticing it and going, oh my God, I did marry my mom and here I am now, and what am I going to do about it? Or, oh my gosh, my boss really is my dad. I feel exactly the same way with him, very small or insignificant, like I did with my dad. How am I going to stop this? One, I stop by acknowledging it. Two, I start to allow myself to feel what I'm feeling about it. And the third thing is, now I need to vocalize to the other person in my life that I am not okay with where we are in this relationship, and I need to do something different. Either we're going to work on it and do something different together, or I'm going to work on me and I'm going to continue to grow. And that may or may not mean to you that the relationship continues. So my focus for you is to think about, you are not your history. Understand your history, because we all have to learn from history, otherwise we're doomed to repeat it, right? Just like the saying goes, right? So learn from it, then understand this very subtle pattern of your history with any kind of trauma got replicated in your current relationships, and now you have an opportunity to do the work to clean that up, so that you don't continue having relationships that make you feel like you're still 5 years old or 6 or 10, whatever age it was, trapped in your parents' home feeling like, I'm never going to get out of this. You have every right in your life to heal from any kind of trauma, any kind of past abuse, misunderstanding, criticism, ignorance, hurt, pain, whatever it is. We all have the right to heal from it and move forward and have the relationships that we deserve. But we cannot do that without doing an inventory of where we come from, understanding the pattern, acknowledging it in the present, and then start to vocalize to the people in your life, this isn't okay. I'm not going to continue living like this. We need to do some work to change this, to move forward, or I'm going to work on me so I can change me and I can move forward. So I hope this was informative for you. This was just a little snippet of some of the work and some of the understanding of what happens to us when we repeat our past, when we don't understand our past. So learning from our history that we can move forward and heal. I'm so glad that you joined me today, and I appreciate the time with you, and I can't wait to come back and for us to do it again. Thank you so much.